My name is Kobe Sconnard, founder and CEO at Ideawake. And today what we're going to be doing is going through really what we've learned taking 300 teams through a process that enables them to validate and test their own ideas at scale. So to kick things off, already intro to myself, CEO at Ideawake, and to give a little agenda for today, what we're going to start off with is really covering the business case and taking a step back for building a culture of innovation and intrapreneurship, movement inside of your company. We're going to then go through the structure and framework you need to have in place to help employees validate and test their own ideas, and then go through just an intro to the program that we put in place in order to foster and enable this. Our program's not the only one out there. There's several, but just kind of to give you a picture of the different components that you'll need for success, and then really how to take what you learn here today and start taking action. So just for a little background on us, like I mentioned, we're Ideawake. We're powering innovation programs in over 39 countries and 185 cities. The core solution is just a software as a service that allows you to capture, evaluate, and implement ideas from frontline staff. So just gives a little bit of context to what we're doing and why we're subject matter experts in this area. Different ways that we see people use the solution, everything from innovation challenges, general suggestion programs, to Shark Tanks, to open innovation if you want to go to customers or the public at large. So like I mentioned, where we're going to start is just building the business case for why you should enable employees to validate and test their own ideas. And for anybody that's involved in the innovation space today, I'm sure that everybody will resonate with this slide here. Fundamental problem is that us as organizations have more people that have ideas than those who know how to go about validating, testing them, and ultimately getting them integrated into operations. So it presents this bottleneck, right? We have all these things that we want to pursue, but the problem is that we cannot pursue them because we don't have the resourcing to do so. Different mechanisms that we can employ to address this bottleneck: straight handoff to internal business units, centralized innovation strategy R&D teams, looking at corporate VC groups for funding internally from a centralized fund. You can look to strategic partnerships with external parties, or you can go to frontline staff. And really what we believe is going to frontline employees is the best way to address that bottleneck. Although not the easiest to set up, like we'll get into, there is a system and a process that you can follow in order to enable this. And really the reason that we believe what we believe is that it really delivers on building a culture of innovation better than any of the other options, and builds a core competency in the organization that employees will be able to go out and validate and test their own ideas. You're going to see a bunch of benefits outside of just the innovation projects that are getting implemented. It's a lot more scalable and cost effective than other options when implemented correctly. And then final piece here is it helps address low workforce engagement and retention. So just taking a step back for that culture of innovation piece, really like the culture of experimentation and innovation, how we define it, which we'll define in just a moment. It's the number one challenge faced by innovation leaders today. And just to define what a culture of innovation is, it's really empowering all employees, regardless of voice or title, to share ideas, and feel comfortable doing so. But it's not just that component, which is a mistake that we see a lot of folks make. Really what we believe is enabling employees to learn new skills and ways of thinking while breaking down silos, and allowing employees to take the learnings that they get from these types of projects or engaging in the process of innovation back to their everyday jobs to see more of the benefits from it. Going into the scalability of internal versus external testing. So really what it comes down to is if you're enabling employees and teaching them to actually validate and develop their own ideas, get them to a point where they're ready to be piloted or actually handle the pilot themselves, you're going to build, like I said, that core competency inside of the organization that's going to pay dividends, versus each time that you want to do like external resource partnership, there's going to be rev share involved in it. There's going to be a lot of external costs to bring, especially a new product or service to market. And you're going to get a lot fewer shots on goal. So our goal overall with these types of programs is to, once again, eliminate the bottleneck. And basically with employees validating and testing their own ideas out, you're going to be able to alleviate that bottleneck much more efficiently. Final piece here relates to employee turnover and just overall engagement. So I'm sure many of you have seen the stats at this point. This is from Gallup. On average, $3,400 out of every $10,000 spent on a per employee disengaged is lost due to that disengagement, driven by higher absenteeism, lower productivity, and lower profitability. What this means at a 250 person organization, you're going to end up with about 3.16 million lost annually just from disengagement. So how do we address the engagement problem? These are not the only options, but these are the three that we really focus on. It's enabling employees to feel the impact of their work, get real-time recognition and feedback, and then have the opportunity to learn skills outside of their traditional title, specifically skills that are going to make them feel like they're prepared for the workforce of tomorrow. Just to show some stats behind each one of those. So for listening to employee ideas and really actually making them feel empowered with a voice, it can measurably increase engagement. This was a study done by Gallup. They found that 30% of workers strongly agreed that their opinions seemed to count. But by increasing this percentage from 30 to 60%, they saw a 27% reduction in turnover, 40% reduction in safety incidents, and a 12% increase in productivity. So how this actually works is they looked at the bottom tier performers and top tier performers out of thousands of companies in this study. And what they found was, right, the companies in the top quartile of performance, this is the results that they saw, and directly tied that and attributed it to being able to have better mechanisms to listen to employees and make them feel like they had a voice in terms of the follow through. Just to show this in the real world, one of our customers, Palisades Tahoe, increased employee learning engagement by 74% in 6 months, leveraging our platform. And so just to put some actual numbers right in the real world versus in studies, this just shows that. Looking at the impact of L&D on engagement and innovation. So a couple different studies here, but 80% of employees said that learning and development opportunities would make them feel more engaged at work. 92% said, this is actually a study by Deloitte, they had a 92% higher likelihood to develop novel products and processes by having an L&D program in place. 94% of employees, according to Gallup, said that they would stay at their companies longer if they offered learning and development opportunities or had a formal program. Just going now into the structure and requirements for building a culture of innovation and really enabling this process for employees to go through, validate, and test their own ideas. The building blocks for it, you need a type of cadence or defined structure for capturing ideas and actually getting those ideas to a point where they can be pitched to leaders who have budget decision-making authority inside of the organization. You need curriculum coaching and a process for employees to actually take a raw idea that they have and get it to a point where it can be presented initially for leadership approval, but then ultimately getting it to a point where it could be piloted or integrated into operations. And finally, everybody's favorite part, change management for actually integrating those ideas that are greenlit from the pilot phase into operations themselves. To give an overview of just our system that we've created, and maybe your process looks similar to this if you're doing any type of bottom-up innovation today. Really, what we focus on is like targeted challenge statements, so topics that are related to an organizational goal. You post one of those out to the organization. You have an ideation process where you're going through and employees are submitting their ideas, collaborating and voting on them, getting them ultimately to ideas that can be shortlisted by a manager or by somebody who's running the program if you have a centralized team in place. Then from there, what ends up happening is you have a validation period, leadership pitch based upon what's learned during that validation process, ultimately leading to a prototype, pilot, and integration into operations. So really what we're talking about today and the focus of the program, the Ideabox program specifically, is enabling employees to submit more concrete ideas and better define them. One of the most common complaints that we hear is that ideas are, for lack of a better term, half-baked when they come in. They're not really well defined, so it's difficult to actually evaluate their validity. So upfront, what it allows you to do is enable employees to submit higher quality ideas that are more concrete and easier to evaluate, also more unique, as you'll see in just a moment. But really where the rubber meets the road is enabling employees to validate and test their own ideas at the validation phase, prototyping, and ultimately piloting phase. How this works, today it's an offline program, so not integrated into software, but it combines curriculum, coaching, and then a structured process for change. So there's a cadence process that you go through step by step in order to make sure that ideas don't die on the vine. But so far, we've taken about 300 teams through this across 7 different verticals, and we've built out about 10 different versions here over the last 4 to 5 years. And just some highlights here, offline version today, like I had mentioned, but really what we found is during COVID, it was very difficult to protect employee time, which is one of the critical components of this. So looking at the different output testing options, you have either building a business case, which is really that validation phase, or the second option for involving employees is going all the way through to pilot. Once again, regardless of whether or not you use Ideawake or another system, really what I want you to take out of today, some of the learnings, is trying to take employees and get them to at least do phase one. There's going to be a ton more benefit of a bottom-up innovation program just beyond ideation, getting employees to actually build out a business case behind their idea versus just having them throw an idea over the fence. Once again, though, second phase, if you're feeling really lofty, is getting them actually involved in the pilot and piloting process and pitching to leaders to ultimately have it integrated into operations. These are just highlights on those different outputs for benchmarking for yourself, which will be included in the follow-up presentation. And just looking at some of the results that we've had from these types of programs. So OSF Healthcare, one of our customers, upfront, what we tried to do was share insights. So we've been putting together lots of insights in order to try to foster different types of thinking related to the challenge statement being addressed. So just for inspiration here, these will all be included in the follow-up presentation. But instead of just throwing out, hey, give us any idea that you have under the sun, one, narrow it down to a challenge statement based on organizational goals. But then also, in addition to that, try to look at places that you can inject insights upfront in the process to help people come up with more unique ideas. So in this example, it was related to aging in place. So looking at stats behind the silver tsunami and the gargantuan, especially in the United States, expansion of the baby boomer population retiring, and then looking at some of the ways that other trends like the subscription box economy or the Uber for X could have an impact on that, or how it could be copy and pasted into healthcare itself. Some of the ideas that came out of that, one of them was hospital at home. This has become a really big trend in the United States now, but this was 2019 before that trend had actually taken off pre-COVID. They were one of the pioneers in it. And then the other one was related to Uber for outpatient services in order to increase accessibility within healthcare. Pro Healthcare, another customer. This is, one of the teams was related to pricing transparency. So it's crazy. One of the things that anybody in the United States, at least when you go to get health services, it's one of the only things that when you're shopping for it, you don't know what it's going to cost before you buy it. So what they wanted to do, this team, it was a director of IT and then a clinical nurse, went through the process of over 150 customer interviews. This was part one, was 47. Did over 150 interviews, over 50 hours of observation, and then created a prototype that was just right into PowerPoint. And then sent that and did 81 pop-up tests by going out to patients when they were going into the hospital, and learned a lot from it, and actually got this integrated into their Epic integration, or their Epic implementation, excuse me. And these were two employees that had no prior business experience or having done anything like this before. Something else that really is a benefit of this, kind of like I mentioned before, versus the other options, is that you create a core competency in the organization, and employees are taking the learnings that they have from these types of programs back to their everyday working lives. So really what we focus on, and what we say is building innovators, not just innovation. And so that IT director that was on the pricing transparency project, one of the first things that they did when they went back to their regular job was, for every IT service request that was submitted, they asked two additional questions to it. What internal or external customer does this request solve a problem for, and how have you actually validated that it's going to solve the problem? So a small example, but it can have a big impact. And a lot of the time what we're looking for isn't the next iPhone. Maybe some of you are. But these little incremental changes that are made throughout the organization, and that's really what I would define, us at Ideawake define as a culture of innovation. Just one more example here. For Sargento, some cool stuff that came out of the different Ideabox programs with them. So incorporating QR codes into packaging and gamifying that process as well. And then just these things don't need to be groundbreaking. Once again, it was one of the staff members was really annoyed because the breakout rooms they normally go into for shared spaces always went over for meetings. So they changed meetings from 30 to 25 minutes, projected thousands of hours in savings annually from starting meetings 5 minutes late. Just looking at the strengths that we found and the weaknesses of the current program, basically today, the benefits, self-driven validation of ideas, and proven to take learnings back from the program itself to their everyday working lives, like the example we just presented with the IT forms. Weaknesses, though, today, It's not very scalable because you can only take, 25 to 30 people through it at a time, normally 8 to 10 teams. And then facilitated sessions are required, whether they're in person or digital. And so really what we've been working on now is focusing on what we call the TurboTax for innovation. So it's taking all the learnings that we've had from this program over the last 4 to 5 years and digitizing the full process in order to enable this to happen at scale. So when you're running a challenge with 1,000 people, instead of just being able to have 30 people go through this learning process, you can take all 75% of the benefits that you would get from the program, apply it to all 1,000 people upfront in the process. How it works, basically a couple different components here, but really like TurboTax made taxes accessible for the everyday American. I don't believe it's available internationally, but really what we focused on was trying to apply that to the complex concept of innovation and making that accessible to everyday employees. So system's fully gamified. You have these different levels, as you can see right here. These different levels break out into these mini learning sections. And the main focus that we've had on this programming overall, and just something to take back if you're planning on implementing your own type of system, is to make sure to make the content approachable as possible, and to what I would call eat your own dog food, in terms of getting people, getting feedback from employees constantly as they're going through this process, especially if you're building out your own curriculum. A lot of the time what happens in the first, 25, 30 teams that we ran through this, it was way over their head. And so it was constantly iterating the content to make sure that it became approachable for people and they could just pick it up and run with it, especially those that don't have any prior experience, that are customer service representatives or frontline support staff. From there, basically what happens is people are filling out these different learning modules, it's automatically filling in the more complex concepts. Nobody knows what a business model canvas is if they've never been introduced to lean or innovation in general. So what happens is you're filling out these different sections. It's automatically generating a canvas, assumptions that you need to test, experiments, and then the assumptions that you need to test, and linking all those things together for you. So just to go through how to start taking action, especially for those that might be new to innovation in the room or just starting their innovation journey, really where we want to go as an organization. I know it's going to be text heavy for the next couple of slides, my apologies. But what we want to do as an organization is take that test and learn culture, and really what that means is, hey, we can do extensive research on a few opportunities today, transition that to doing critical research on many opportunities, increase the speed that it takes to actually validate and get something to a point of piloting from 5 to 6 months down to 4 to 6 weeks, and then ultimately be able to reduce the risk for projects and doing a lot of de-risking up front before a lot of dollars and time are spent on them. So going from investing larger dollars in fewer projects to smaller dollars in many projects. But the issue is, hey, it's really easy to say, very difficult to do. So the methodology that we've come up with, and what I always say is don't run before you can walk. It's walk, run, scale framework. And a lot of the time there's an issue because of the fact that the innovation team is expected to deliver the next iPhone when they're only resourced to deliver, incremental improvements to processes. So separate conversation. I think we've actually, in a prior presentation for innovators, if you look at the library, I'm sure that you can find that. It's Overcoming the Execution Gap is the name of that one, where we really do a deep dive into how to set expectations with leadership. So you're setting yourself up for success. But really what we found works best is, especially for early teams just getting started with this program and process, start with walking. Do incremental improvements that are simpler to implement, simpler to validate and test. Then from there, you're going to build up the capability internally to actually go to the disruptive or transformational opportunities, which we define as running and scale. Like I said, text heavy slides, just going to highlight a few points here. But what we're looking at under that walk is just to build an initial team of innovators in the organization that are going to allow us to have some initial successes. So we're focused only on incremental type of projects in that first phase that are low complexity and a short timeline to ROI. What happens with that is that I call them enabling events. You prove the value and the business case behind the program in general within the first 6 months to a year. Then from there, when you're going to leadership, you don't have projects that are, Horizon 2 or these larger scale projects that are new products and services that take 2 to 3 years to realize an ROI from. And then a lot of the time, I've just seen this so many times at this point, what happens is if you have a 2 to 3 year time horizon for your program and you have no ROI that you can show up front, the program's going to get less funding versus more. So focusing on the short time horizon projects that you can show tangible, actual dollar savings or revenue growth from, and then using that as a stepping stone to get the resources that you'll need to set yourself up successfully for the run or the scale phase. So with that, hope that was helpful for everybody. Going to open it up for questions. Hopefully we're on time. Yes.
That's great, Kobe. Thanks so much for that. Yeah, that was awesome. Great overview of your product and the pipeline and the process. Yeah. So I just have one quick question. You had mentioned 7 verticals that you have experimented in or worked within. Presented a couple examples on healthcare. What are some of the other verticals that you and your group have worked in?
For sure. And so definitely where we started was healthcare actually with this. And like I said, focusing the programming and all the content on making it approachable for folks that were clinical phase, like patient facing, that were customer service reps, but then expanded the program out into food services, financial services, manufacturing, technology. Let's see, I think that's 5. Got 5 of the 7. I can't remember the other 2 off the top.
No, that's great. That's great. Thank you for that. Okay. Yes, absolutely. So let's just open up the floor to questions here. Either come on the chat or come on camera and jump in, and we'll just have an open dialogue.
Great. And just one other thing I'd love to add just before we open it up here, just so you know, like there are Adobe Kickbox created a versioning of the program. It's more designed, at least the initial iteration was designed to be like technology facing. But for those who are just looking to get started with the program, I mean, obviously, I just showed you what we have here and what we're building out. But there are open source options that are available. Specifically, Adobe Kickbox would be something to look at. Just want to make sure that we're providing the most value and giving people, regardless of their stage of journey, the opportunity to start taking action.
That's great. Thank you for that.
Of course.
Questions, comments, feedbacks, challenges?
Yes, Ismail speaking here from Madrid. I got a question. What does it take for an innovation manager that would like to run an Ideabox challenge to manage the challenge and to follow up, monitor, etc.?
Yeah, definitely. So we have like a full resourcing guide by phase that we can send over. I don't have it in this deck, unfortunately, but normally what we say for an innovation manager, instead of executing on the work, really what the transition is, normally for innovation teams, if it's centralized, you become responsible for a lot of the validation, testing, and experimentation. Over time, what we try to transition those roles to is a support role that's supporting several different teams doing their own validation. So upfront in the process, it's about 25% of one FTE for the challenge, like front-end ideation and collection piece. And then it's really going to depend upon the team and how you want to structure things for the validation and testing piece. Normally, I'd suggest similar amount of time per 2 teams being allocated, so 25% of one employee for when you're getting the program started. But overall and over time, as you go through multiple iterations of it, it can go down to as low as like 5 to 10% time per team running through the programming process.
Okay.
I know that that's pretty abstract right now, but like I said, happy to share some follow-up information with you that'll be more concrete. Is that helpful, at least as an initial explanation though, Ismail?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you very much for that.
My pleasure.
Oh, we got a question in the chat.
Great.
So Kobe, question is, who are Ideawake's target customers or buyers, innovation directors, C-suite, CIO, HR?
So answer everybody loves to hate is it depends. Normally for the like new products and services or the more, innovation type use case, we're coordinating with a director of innovation or innovation manager. But for other use cases, because about half our customers are in it doing innovation type challenges, and then the other half are in continuous improvement or another type of focus area. So for continuous improvement, it rolls up into like continuous improvement team, which rolls up into operations. And then if you're looking at the employee engagement aspect of this, a lot of the time HR will be the first party to reach out. So normally what ends up happening is if all three of those functions exist in the organization, we'll start in one area, and challenges like the topics that we're launching are focused in that team's goals, and then the system quickly expands to those other two.
If there are no questions, I got an additional question here.
Please, go ahead.
How flexible is your commercial model in the sense of unbundling the three different stages?
So you're saying how flexible is the
Would you sell, for instance, scale as a standalone if a client would ask for it?
Of course. So, and by the way, just to provide context there for the walk, run, scale, that's the framework that we provide. It's just like our methodology for like our strategic approach as we start working with organizations. These don't apply to the specific plan models at all. It's just, like looking at from where you want to start to where you want to end up in terms of like focus and KPIs to kind of look through. But happy to share commercials with you as well, separately if you're interested.
Sure, would appreciate that. Yeah.
Great.
We probably have time for one more question, and then we're going to have to complete the session.
Travel, observability, compatibility, local complexity. See, I think there's another question here in the chat.
Yes, go right ahead.
All right. So how do you integrate, just for the group, how do you integrate the proven Rogers 5 factors in your prioritization and validation stages? High relative advantage, triability, observability. So actually not familiar with the Rogers 5 factors. Maybe I'm familiar with it in a different like terminology. How our program works, it's based on assumptions. So every single new concept, whether it's, a improvement, whether it's a new product, what we look at is validating critical assumptions around the canvas. So if we look at where we start for phase one, it's does the problem exist? Does the customer exist? Does the customer have the problem that we think they do? And does the solution actually solve the customer problem? So those are the 4 that we start with. And it's a total of about 15 different assumptions or 15 different questions that we need to validate from start to finish in order to get to pilot. And then those enter into some of the things that you have here. Like you had mentioned, low complexity and high relative advantage. So like looking at basically the next thing is if all those things hold true, what is the customer doing today to solve the problem that we think they have? And then how is our solution solve the customer problem better? And then how do we prove, using different types of experiments and testing that our solution solves the customer problem better? So this is really, really long-winded right now, I realize, but we have like a framework where we're going through a series of questions that need to be answered and breaking it down that way and trying to once again make the content approachable by putting it into questions that people are going to understand.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kobe. That was a great presentation, and thanks for the feedback. And thanks everybody for joining us as well. Feel free to continue the conversation on the Innovators platform. There are links popping up in the chat now for agendas as well as platforms for sharing and continuing the conversation. So with that being said, we are complete. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.